The resolution to adopt a substantial amendment number 2015-005 to the fiscal year 2014-15 annual action plan authorizing $1.3 million home investment partnerships program loan to the Housing Authority, the City of Fresno, for its Lowell neighborhood project. If we can have staff come down and do the presentation.
Good morning, Council President, City Council, Jennifer Clark, Development and Resource Management. Today we are considering a substantial amendment to the 2014-15 Annual Action Plan to authorize $1.3 million Home Investment Partnerships Program loan to the Housing Authority, who is partnering with the Lowell CDC for a Lowell neighborhood project. There were several questions that council members had requested additional information, additional clarification. So we wanted to provide some additional information today to try to answer those questions that were raised. This particular project really ticks all of the boxes that we talked about throughout the consolidated plan process and throughout the annual action plan process over the last few weeks. We talked a lot about neighborhood participation, identification of projects by neighborhoods that would make the greatest impact in their area. We talked a lot about capacity building. How do we bring additional agencies up to the capacity that they can perform projects on their own? We talked quite a bit about the elimination of blight in our neighborhoods and how do we reinvest in our existing and established housing stock, including the preservation of affordable housing, the creation of new workforce housing, and a broader range of income availability for housing, stabilizing neighborhoods through the right kinds of investment and leveraging of private equity. So this morning we have a couple of presenters who are coming to assist me, and the first this morning really to talk about the properties that we are proposing for reinvestment through new construction as well as rehabilitation. First up will be Phil Sky with the Lowell CDC. Do you want me to leave the presentation? Do you want me to leave it up for you?
Oh, I'm fine. Okay. You gonna click through it? Okay. All right. Thanks. Good morning, Council. Appreciate you all very much being here. I'm a founding board member of the Lowell Community Development Corporation. The Lowell CDC started about 4 years ago, really as an outgrowth of a commitment that the city had made to the Lowell neighborhood, and the Lowell neighborhood had reciprocated to the city around serving as a pilot project, a pilot neighborhood, to figure out through hell or high water how we are going to revitalize our city's most neglected neighborhoods historically over the last 40 or so years. We acknowledge as a city, we acknowledge as a neighborhood that none of us exactly knew how to do that. We were going to figure it out. The city had things it had to figure out. The community had things it had to figure out, but we were going to learn together. And so here we are today. Over the course of that time, the neighborhood had organized. The neighborhood began to realize in short order that one of the biggest conversations it was going to have, one of the biggest things it was going to have to tackle was going to be around housing, home ownership, and quality rental housing, both at the same time. Because without quality rental housing, we're not going to see an increase in home ownership. Without an increase in home ownership, we are not going to see the quality of life and the stability in the community that we want to see that will attract quality renters. So the Lowell CDC was born, and this particular project has been in the works really, frankly, from the beginning. We've been trying to work toward the goal of tackling a project that was going to build the capacity of the Lowell CDC so that we can continue to sort of lead in this particular area, the rest of the city in terms of building capacity of a community-based organization that would be able to chart the course and chart the path for other neighborhoods where we're constantly sharing and learning from each other, but this is a unique opportunity that's been presented in partnership with the Housing Authority. This particular project, as you have been made aware, really consists of a few different parcels. You have 240, 250 Calaveras, and then an infill opportunity on Glen Street. This has been an exciting project, one that the neighborhood identified. We drove through the neighborhood with the Housing Authority years ago. We talked through it. We went block by block, street by street, and said these are our highest priorities because they are points of leverage in our neighborhood that will yield significant additional private investment, a lesson we have learned in our city and in our own revitalization efforts over the years. That when we invest in strategic key areas, key properties, that it yields significant private investment and improvement of quality of life for thousands of residents. The design we're very excited about, we're enthused about. There's been a ton of community input and great partnership with the Housing Authority in the design of this project, which you'll see in a moment. I want to just say this about the 240, 250 Calaveras project, and then I'll say a word about Glen. 240, 250 Calaveras has been a problem property in our neighborhood for over 2 decades. 2 decades. This property has caused significant harm to our neighborhood. Drug sales, prostitution, other forms of criminal activity, code violations beyond measure. There is an open 708 case by PD on this property today. 708 case meaning public nuisance case. Code enforcement has violations that are incredible against this property, and it has changed hands 3 times in the last decade, all to no avail, because the same private property owners that buy this property realize that the only way for them to make money in its current condition is to make zero improvements, and has been a significant source of blight, which we know this council cares a lot about, and this community cares a lot about, and the city cares a lot about. For example, I'll just say this. There's a project that was done in the El Dorado Park neighborhood in Councilmember Capriolio's district on San Ramon Street from May 2012 to May 2014. There were 80 calls for service on that property over a 2-year span. Since the Housing Authority redid that particular project, that has been cut in half. This particular project on Calaveras, this property on Calaveras, in 1 year's span, there have been 130 calls for service in 1 year. We are looking for the same type of result as a result of this partnership, and you can see clearly why this property was identified by the CDC and the Housing Authority and the Neighborhood Association. Quick word about Glen. The reason we identified that project is because those parcels have sat vacant for decades as well. And despite our hope that private investors would become engaged, the cost of construction, the property values in our neighborhood do not allow for private investment without some form of subsidy. Frankly, at the end of the day, if we don't make these investments now, those properties will continue to remain vacant and will continue to not encourage additional private investment on Glen Avenue. This is an opportunity the neighborhood feels. This is how we see it, to bring high-quality, affordable housing to a neighborhood where, from a CDC standpoint, we are saying we need more home ownership, but we also have to see the quality of rental properties increase as well. The bar has to be raised, which is why we have been working through the Mayor's Code Enforcement Task Force and other things to do that very work. This is part of that work on the ground in the Lowell neighborhood. One of the things we're really excited about is in the Lowell neighborhood, there is a scarcity of rental property for large families, in particular, quality rental property for large families. And we don't have a scarcity of, so we don't have a scarcity of large families. We just don't have housing for large families in our neighborhood, and that's what the Glen Project helps us to address, filling needs with the right tools in the right moment in our neighborhood. Next slide. So here are pictures of the current sites. You all understand the project, I think, well. Basically, it's a combination of a substantial rehab at the 240-250 Calaveras site and then new construction on the Glen site. The total of the project is $6.8 million. The funding comes through a tax credit program. That's where the majority of it comes from. A much, much smaller slice comes through home funds, which we're seeking today approval from this council for. And then lastly, the Housing Authority and the Lowell CDC have partnered to invest our dollars into this project as well. I want to invite Esther Delahaye, who's the Executive Director of the Lowell CDC, to the microphone. She's going to share about the current conditions at both of these sites.
Thank you. As you can see from the pictures, the current conditions at Calaveras are harsh. There is no grass there, number one. There's concrete. There is parking cages in the front of the property as well as the back of the property. The quality of housing there is below standard. Many of the units that are vacant now are boarded, as well as some of the units that are occupied have boarded windows as well. You can see that there are lots of broken brick around the area, broken rebar on the exterior. As far as the interior goes, it doesn't get much better. There are, as Phil said, code violations, current code violations there. I've been out there in the last few months with code enforcement officers 2 to 3 times. The interior of most of the units have seen at one time or another water damage, either in the past or currently, which has resulted in mold in various places, including under kitchen sinks, in the bathrooms, around the water heaters. The tile, the cabinets, a lot of those are missing. Drawers are missing out of the kitchens. Doors are missing off the cabinets. You can see lots of showing visible site of rodents, roaches, cockroaches, mice, rats living there currently. And the bathrooms, not much better. That's our current conditions at our Calaveras property. The renderings for this property, here as you can see, will make a substantial difference to the street, to the entire community. The front will be opened up. Parking will be moved all the way to the back of the unit. And so the front, you will be welcomed by a wonderful entryway, a grass courtyard with benches, places for family to sit, to barbecue, place for kids to play without being in the hot, being on the hot concrete during the summer. Here's an aerial view. As you can see, there will be trees planted, play space. Also, one of the units on the back right-hand side there is going to be converted so that there will be community space on the downstairs. Currently it's a 2-story townhouse, so that will be converted to one unit above with the community center below, with space for the on-site manager, with computers available to the residents there, community space available to the residents as well. This is our current Glen site. As you can see, it's vacant. It's 2 lots right next to each other, which allow for plenty of space. This is the rendering of the front, which will fit nicely on that street. As you drive down Glen Street from Divisadero, you will see single-family homes on the right-hand side, and then the empty lot, followed by apartment complexes. So this apartment complex being put on Glen will resemble from the street 2 craftsman-style homes, which fit nicely onto this street. Again, there'll be space in the middle, walkway in the middle there to the other units that are behind the front units, courtyard area, lots of green space, and places for families to sit and be able to be together. Visibility, there's windows on the front and the back so that there's high visibility to the street and walkability there. Is that all I've got? Next up, Tracewell is coming from the Housing Authority to talk about the project sources and uses.
Good morning, council members. Good to see you again. Thank you for having us back and for allowing us more time to talk about this important project. I'm going to talk through some of the numbers with you all and reflect on the questions that were asked at the last council meeting and hopefully provide some background and some additional information for you. This first slide is from your original packet. It is just meant to level set you. On the original project budget, you can see the three main sources of funding coming from City Home Funds, the Housing Authority, which up there is listed as Housing Relinquished Fund Corps, and tax credit equity, which will be an outside private investor. The uses, you can see the breakdown as you saw them last week. The whole project is $6.8 million in the original budget. A couple of the questions that we had from you all last week concerned soft costs and then also cost per unit. So we wanted to take a little bit of time to go through some of the soft costs. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you will see a breakout of the soft costs for this project. What we wanted to do is to highlight for you the particular areas of soft costs that are specifically relevant to tax credit projects. As we discussed at the last council meeting, this is an instrument, a funding source that has certain parameters and certain restrictions and requirements, if you will. So the highlighted areas, for example, the market study, the legal, different consultants in syndication and planning, those as well as the fees for the low-income housing tax credits and the accounting and the audit are specific to what the tax credit rules require us to use. And we have done 15 tax credit deals now, and so have a pretty good handle on what those costs are. In addition, you'll see on the soft costs here relocation. We have to include a certain amount of budget to relocate the families who are currently in the property. Those highlighted soft costs total just under $400,000. So in addition, we wanted to be able to provide you information on common area costs. When we're looking at cost per unit, some of the comparables that you'll see provided to you by city staff indicate cost per unit. And there are common area costs that are associated with this development as well, which may or may not be part of a regular rehab. These are also many required by the Tax Credit Allocation Committee. For example, the community space that Esther just talked about, we have also included things like the tot lot and created some better parking situations. Those costs total about $500,000. On the next slide, you'll see a shortened version of the estimated construction savings. You received a much longer list of all of the construction costs in your original packet, but to kind of save your eyes, what we did is just list some of the opportunities that we see that may be available for line item savings. So this is to remind you that the budget that we provided to you was our estimated saving or estimated construction costs based on January, our application to the City Home Funds back in January. So, as we get more refined around the project, we obviously are able to see where we might be able to gather some savings. In addition, You also see line items there, and oftentimes in our budget, the line items that the city may choose or that we may choose are composed in different ways or comprised in different ways. So these are many of the items we talked about last week, and this drives to about $450,000 worth of savings, including the reduction in profit and overhead for our general contractor. So if we were to take, you can see the savings here. If we were, in fact, to take the $500,000 roughly of construction savings, there's a couple of different things that one can do with that in the context of a tax credit application. What we've done in the past, if we generated savings, we drop those to the bottom line, we put them in a contingency or in a reserve in case we come up with unexpected costs during the renovation, which often happens in a substantial rehab. Or we work with our investor to figure out other ways to appropriately spend any savings. The other thing that you can do is reduce the overall budget before you go to do a tax credit application. And if that's the case, then those savings are proportionately reduced in the sources. So in this particular case, you can see that the sources, about 20% of the sources of the financing are coming from city home funds, about 7% from housing authority, and about 74% from our outside private investor. So if we were to take the $500,000 in savings that we have identified as potential savings, we would then ask the city for $1.2 million in home funds, and you can see the other reductions illustrated here. We also did some comparables for you all so that you can see how this project compares to other recent tax credit projects. We added some additional information. Some of this is slightly different than what you saw on Friday, and we spent time over the weekend updating and making sure our numbers were comparable to what city staff had prepared. So the first line below the average, you see the Lowell CDC as originally presented, the costs. The Lowell CDC line that says after is after a reduction of the $500,000 that we mentioned. And we also wanted, since we had a great discussion about prevailing wage at the last meeting, we wanted to do some comparables for you regarding prevailing wage. So as you can see, when you compare it to like projects, the costs are not completely out of line. Jennifer, I think you wanted to wrap up?
Thank you, Tracewell. So we really wanted to give the council an opportunity to continue to have a conversation, continue to have a discussion, be able to answer many of the questions that were raised last week. We hope that this presentation does that. Wanted to really summarize again how this project really meets all of those criteria that we talked about over the last month when we've been talking about the consolidated plan and the annual action plan. And these are funds that are allocated through that process. We really wanted to highlight the fact that this is not just a city-initiated project. We didn't just randomly go out and pick a project that we thought would be good. The neighborhood went to the housing authority and said, this project means something in our neighborhood. Elimination of blight, elimination and reduction of calls for service from police department, from code enforcement, from the fire department is really critical to us in terms of building and stabilizing our neighborhood. It also builds capacity with the Lowell CDC. This allows them to start to begin the process of becoming a certified housing development organization, or a CHODO, that we've talked about in the past. We only have one right now. It creates a range of affordable housing, not just stabilizing and reducing blight and eliminating blight in one property, but also adds workforce, large family housing at another site as well. And then leveraging private equity, really critically important to us that our dollars are not the only dollars in a project. And as you see here, it's just under 20% of the overall project cost. So I think we've done a really good job of leveraging outside dollars to make sure that we get the biggest impact in our neighborhoods. And we are all here to answer questions if you have them at this time. Thank you.
All right, we have several cards up here. First up, we have Barbara Hunt.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Welcome home. You guys thought more about Washington, D.C., about this place here, so I don't see why you're back here now, because when an item come up on the agenda, on any item, you guys not here, the item is, the vote is what the vote is. I don't see why we back here no way. Got me down here. And this place here used to be the Jefferson District over here. They supposed to have all them houses stayed over there by law. Then Lowell came up over there. And I'm saying that this, you guys' job, code enforcement job, everybody didn't do their job, because look at the apartments. Look at the houses. How you guys let it get like that? Because you didn't care. You went north or you went southeast when your district fell, when in everybody else's district, but our district over here, our money. Now you want to come up here and beg for something else. It don't make sense. When the city council united with redevelopment, they're the same people. In 1979, I got the papers. Then the redevelopment is assessor's office is mixed all together with redevelopment. The city of Fresno, the franchise up there, they got money, billions of dollars, and it all belongs to the city of Fresno. That's why I don't see why we up here asking for nothing. Tell those people to give our money back to us, and we can take care of all of our business. Swearingen won't have to go through this here. When the way she's going, she got her pet projects. This place don't belong to Swearingen. She ain't nobody's law God up in this place. It belongs to the people. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. If she was in charge, they wouldn't be running to Washington, D.C., trying to get money and help from everybody else. We done fixed up every district around here. Messed up everybody's district. They done created your district, Mr. Brandell, and then they created Olivia's district out there. And Southwest Fresno is stretched everywhere but in Southwest. We in Southeast Fresno say, where's our money? Where's our houses? We supposed to been in there something. Y'all finna take us through all this crap? And you guys are taking us through right here. It's not there. Nobody has did no work in none of these districts, and Southwest Fresno has been left out. And I know I've talked to every district around here and got good projects for them. And I told them at that time, let's get some of these projects to Southwest Fresno, and they're not there. Before you put this lighting on, I'm going to tell you my second half of this. Now, you guys have spent all the money, Mr. Brand, everybody spent all the money in their district and left Southwest Fresno out. I says, put this project downtown, build them houses over here, put out some nice things like you got in y'all districts around here by law, and then those developers that own downtown, they won't be owning up everything. They bought those general obligation bonds in 1976. Yes, build up downtown. Yes, bring that money. Yes, City of Fresno got all this money. Yes, and them people upstairs owe us money. And yes, all my folks is up on the slave ship in the 18 inches. And yes, my grandma, y'all stole the land from all the Indians and stuff over here.
Thank you, Barbara.
And yes, I'm going to sit down right now.
All right,
but you should have sat down when you was in Washington, D.C., and I wouldn't be up here.
Steve Walter.
Hello, everybody. Steve Walter. My wife and I are major investors in the Lowell neighborhood. That's the only place we invest. We don't own anything on Calaveras, and we've been doing this for 10 years now. We don't own anything on Calaveras, and there's one reason why: 240, 250 Calaveras. I've been approached several times by real estate agents to buy this property. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. It's a great project for the Housing Authority, though, because it's going to need a project with funding and dedication to see a job well done. We've seen 3 investors come in. They haven't done very well. Private investors aren't going to do this. This is an excellent project for the home funds. My wife and I invested about $3 to $4 million in the Lowell neighborhood over the past 10 years. I think we're the second largest owners in the area. We're pretty selective about what projects we look at, what we buy. And this one wouldn't do it. And we don't make money on stuff because, obviously that's a tough neighborhood to do things, but we're invested in that area and its success. I understand there were some questions about some cost estimates, and I know that they're coming down. I just bought 4 mirrors from San Joaquin Glass. 4 mirrors cost me $272. I don't have to pay prevailing wage to have those installed. I did it myself. The challenge with mirrors, and that's the exact reason, is you got a light switch here, you got a light here, you got a sink here, you got a bathroom here. The mirror can be any which way, but it has to be sized, it has to look decent. You have to do almost a custom mirror. You can't go to Home Depot and buy a $59 mirror for majority of projects. I know. I would do it if I could, but I ended up buying the glass. So that's just an example. You got to pay the prevailing wage. That's why your numbers are higher. That's all there is to it. That's part of the thing. This project, major problems for years. I actually cleaned a lot of the alleys. That's one of the worst right now. There's a homeless people living in the car behind there. There's no management on site that's taking care of that. The garbage is all over the place in that alley. And I am constantly calling Mid-Valley and Jerry Schubert to address the issues in that alley. It's a mess. Significant public nuisance crime reports that Phil talked about. You need a tipping point, and this is the project to do it. It's going to make a huge difference in that neighborhood. There are already 5 boarded up apartment complexes in just that 100 and 200 block. You do this, people are going to look at that street differently. The neighborhood's going to look at that differently. It's going to be clean, quality housing, not what we have. We need affordable housing. Even more, we need clean, affordable housing and quality. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Hayden.
Morning, my name is Bob Hayden, and about 5 years ago I purchased a home in the Lowell neighborhood, and I have family members asking me constantly, why did you move down there? I grew up in North Fresno. My family's been here since my dad was born in 1908 here on Echo. He worked in the Security Bank building for like over 40 years. Spent most of his time downtown. He was involved in the city government. I went away to school, went to UC Davis, came back here, bought a nice house, and when I came back in the Fresno High area, beautiful house. But since then, my parents got old. I decided to help take care of them, so I moved back to their house on San Bruno by Fig Garden Village. Lived there until I bought this house. And I started hearing about Lowell back in the early 90s and about what was going on and all the crime and what was happening. But I started hearing about families coming back to the Lowell neighborhood. And I would read articles in the paper. I would actually cut them out, and I still have them. And I started noticing that there was a desire for people to reclaim this beautiful neighborhood. And I got more and more interested, and I ended up going to Fresno State, taking a social entrepreneurship class. And my project was based in the Lowell neighborhood, and I started attending Lowell Neighborhood Association meetings. And it's there that I saw the quality of people that were living in this neighborhood and wanting to bring it back. And I started seeing that these people were serious, and they had lived here, they moved here, and they put their money where their mouth is, and they still do. And what they're doing now is incredible. I've just seen, I mean, I get depressed. In my neighborhood, I get depressed. I go to a Lowell Neighborhood Association meeting, I come out of there invigorated. I come out of it invigorated because I see people like me that decided that they want to come back and help this neighborhood reestablish itself as one of the best neighborhoods in Fresno. And I see this project as just part of that. And what Steve was talking about on Calaveras, that's a beautiful street, but it is I mean, when you bring the drugs and the crime, it just tears it down, and people are afraid to be down there. But that is one beautiful street, and it needs dedication, and it needs this project. And on Glen, I live on Glen, and you know, I'm the third owner of my house. It hasn't been a rental, so the inside is just a beautiful woodwork in it. And I wouldn't trade living there for any place else. It's just a beautiful place. And I have also have renters there that are great tenants. And when I sit in my backyard with my tenants in my neighborhood, and I'm just going, like, man, this is just a great place. And I want to continue that. I don't want to see my neighborhood punched in the gut anymore by city government. That's how I feel sometimes. We're doing our best to make this a good neighborhood, and we're just would like to see it just keep improving. Thank you.
Simone Cranston Rhodes.
Good morning, council members. I'm here with Tenants Together, and we would just like to support the vision that the Housing Authority and the Lowell CDC has for creating affordable housing. We think that this is a great route to go through. And we also would like to mention that the city of Fresno is behind in meeting affordable housing requirements, and this would be a great way to continue to create affordable housing in Fresno. And that's all. Thank you.
Barbara Fisk.
Good morning, council members. Thank you so much for coming back this morning for a special meeting. I understand what that entails, and I appreciate that you've been able to carve out of your schedule to come. I sit on the Housing and Community Development Commission here with the City of Fresno, and I've learned a lot about the funds that we receive from HUD and the different ways that they can be used. I also am the vice chair of the Lowell Neighborhood. Actually, I chair the Lowell Neighborhood Association, and I sit on the board. I'm a founding board member of the Lowell CDC. I really appreciate the work that you are doing to spend these monies well. And there is a lot of Fresno that needs these funds. And the way that these funds are set up is they need partners who have taken the time to understand the rules and the systems and go after those. When we founded the Lowell CDC board, one of our major partners was Habitat for Humanity. Director Tony Miranda was our treasurer, and Habitat for Humanity was our fiscal agent. And with that initial partnership, we started understanding what it takes to apply for home funds. And we have great respect for other entities in the city who are doing just the same. And we partner and try to share resources as we go towards these funds. Something else that's very interesting, though, about this project, something like 240, 250 Calaveras occurred because of decisions made by this body. Not by you, but by decades ago, decisions made about rezoning the Lowell neighborhood and other downtown neighborhoods that are along the 180 that made it profitable to tear down old, beautiful houses that weren't so old back then and build these boxy apartment complexes. Those decisions came out of this body. Now, by all means, I'm not saying that even then, back then, they did it in order to create a ghetto situation or to create, what we have now with 240, 250. But now we have the opportunity of changing those actions and improving a complex that is just a couple of doors up from the city's oldest park, Dickey Park. And we could change it so that, as an anchor, other people who want to invest around it can see that that would be a shrewd and profitable thing to do. Thank you so much for the time you're taking to reconsider this. Thank you.
All right, those are all the cards I have. If we have any other members of the public that would like to speak on this project, please come down and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Randina Elias. I live at 240 North Calaveras. I lived in apartment 7. I'm now at apartment 4. And I'm coming to tell you that it would be a great deal if we had this funding. I'm one of the tenants there, and I live on a date. I have 2 children, beautiful children. One straight A student would tremendously make a big difference in their life, and in my life, my family's life, and some other tenants in that apartment complex. I'm kind of here, if you don't make that decision, I'm probably backing up and moving out. I'm at the point where I just have so many people going in and out. There's no apartment manager or anything, and there's so many people going in and out, dealing drugs and other things that we just can't. We're at the end, our end situation. So I'm very hopeful that you guys will pass this and we can get moving on it and have more habitable living. Thank you.
Do we have any other members of the public that would like to comment on this item? Please come down and state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, My name is Brianna Lott, and I live on 219 North Calaveras. And I'm here because I live on Calaveras. I've lived on Calaveras for about 4 years, and I see the destruction and the environment that my neighbors live in and how it affects them. So my neighbors, I'm greeted by them every day, Destiny, Gigi, and Precious, and I see how they live right across the street from those brown apartments, and I see how they're affected just on a daily basis. And then I'm also here because I'm in my final year of finishing my master's in marriage and family therapy at Fresno Pacific University, and there's many studies shown that environment affects the mental health of an individual and then affects the mental health of the city. And so I just see this project and any investment into the health of the city of Fresno would be really valuable, and I know it will affect a longer term than what we probably expect. Thank you.
Good morning, Council. My name is Randy White. I live at 264 North Van Ness in the Lowell neighborhood now for 22 years. We've seen an amazing amount of change happen in that period of time. And the change comes primarily because people get involved and a neighborhood grows in its capacity to change. It builds local leadership, and the fact that you have a Lowell CDC standing up here is one example of that. The fact that you have a Lowell Neighborhood Association standing here is a testament to that. That doesn't happen overnight. This kind of investment in institutions that have been born out of the soil, it really makes sense. It's a good use of public money to invest in that kind of neighborhood capacity. And so, especially the track record of the Lowell CDC, the integrity of that organization. I'm not a member of that organization. I'm not on their payroll. I'm not a staff member, but I've watched them now, and I've assessed that they are an organization full of integrity. They're a great partner for the city to have. Doesn't the city want partners that it trusts and can invest in? If I were sitting on that council, I would look for partners like that and invest in them. Secondly, this project responds to the voice of the community. People have sat in Lowell Neighborhood Association meetings and talked about this, debated it. What should it look like? We've advised the city. What should it be like? You've got community participation. Isn't that what we want? This is the kind of participation we have to invest in. And so my encouragement is to listen to the voice of the community that says we want to be an active partner in the healing of our own neighborhood. Finally, I just think it makes a lot of sense as the investment of public money. Obviously, it's going to have to meet federal mandates for quality and labor, but it does much more than that. It creates synergy in the city. Not just Lowell, it's going to accomplish something in Lowell. Obviously, you've heard from all the neighbors. You've heard the difference this project done this way is going to make for neighbors, but it's going to do more than that. It's going to have synergy in the city. It's going to encourage this kind of participation, which we want more of in our city, right? And so I'm excited for that reason. It's an important symbol for our city. You all know how important symbols are. We talk about the importance of public art. We have to invest in public art. Well, this is a form of a quality of life statement when we do this project in this way. It's a statement about what we value and what's important. We're not going to throw up something that may survive a few years. We're going to do something really well, and we want Lowell to become known for that. And then finally, it models a city-neighborhood partnership as well. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Reese Sky. I live at 473 North Calaveras with my husband, 2 children, dog, and fish. We are going on 9 years as residents of the Lowell neighborhood, and there has been a lot of growth. There has been a lot of change. There has been a lot of progress, and we want to see that continue. I don't understand all the financial breakdowns and all the ins and outs and what kind of mirrors need to be put. I don't understand any of that. But what I do understand is that there are children in our neighborhood who will never have the opportunity that some of your children and grandchildren have if this project does not go through. Your role as a city council member, a part of your role, is to help infuse life into the chaos that we experience every day in this city. And when you say yes to this project, you are infusing life into the chaos on Calaveras. The residents are sick of it. We're doing our part, and you get to do your part. Please, please make sure that this happens. It may not be your district, but these are our children. The children of Fresno are depending on your yes today. Please help infuse life into this chaos. Thank you.
Do we have any other members of the public that would like to comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the dais. I have several council members that would like to chat about this, as you can imagine. It is my district, so I'm actually going to start off with the comments. So we're here today, and I don't know, this may ultimately be called Mirror Gate when it's all said and done. But before I start kind of my comments about the project, I do want to acknowledge Councilmember Paul Capriolio, who's not here. This is a special meeting today, as all of you know, and he is a lawyer and he's in court, and he couldn't just move his court cases around because of the whims of this council. So I just want to acknowledge that were it not for court, he would be here today. But he has 4 cases, and I know he's doing his best. So anyhow, so this came up last week in a council meeting, and I wasn't here to be a part of that discussion, but I've since certainly been briefed a multitude of times by several people about the issue. And the first thing I want to do is acknowledge my colleagues who have raised, in my opinion, what are pretty valid concerns. We talked a lot about this weekend about a multitude of issues. It really wasn't just the finances of this project that I think my colleagues had issue with. That was a big part. How much things cost is relevant. We are, in a very real way, the stewards of the public's finance, the public's funds, and I know for sure my colleagues take that role extremely seriously. So I very much appreciate the fervor in which we go through these projects and make sure that they do make financial sense. And I think that the reality of it is we can always do better, probably on every project. So this one, no exception to that. So I want to acknowledge that we went through with a fine-tooth comb, and I think we realized that there may be areas where we could have saved some money. And I think that the revised project to the tune of $512,000, I think, reflects that. The other thing I want to acknowledge about what I've heard from my colleagues on this was really just the process in which this was rolled out. And I think we all acknowledge that this could have been done better. There could have been more time spent with council members that we know take an extra interest in these types of projects. And a few of them, I've heard from a few of my colleagues now that there wasn't enough time spent. And we could have done a better job, in this building and outside of this building, with making sure that these projects were explained in greater detail. So I think a lot was learned, and I want to just say that up front, that as I've heard what's gone on in the last few days, there are a lot of things that could have been done better, that may have resulted in potentially a different outcome, because we don't know what the outcome is going to be today. And so I respect my colleagues very much, and I think the points that have been raised have quite a bit of validity. And so I wanted to really start my comments with that, because the truth of the matter, as much as I would like to say this is a black and white issue, it's not. It's in a very interesting area of gray, because we're going to have, and you'll hear, what will be a philosophical debate on how we spend these funds and how they should be spent, what they should be spent for. And I'm going to lean one way about how they should be spent, and some folks may lean a different way. But as we talk about the philosophical discussion, about what these dollars are supposed to be spent on, for me, it's very clear that this is what this resource is for. To go into communities, to revitalize neighborhoods and projects that, quite frankly, the private sector won't or can't do. So there's going to be some discussion today about, the private sector would have done this, what it would have looked like, and, it could have been done cheaper. And that actually is true. But I'm going to submit that the private sector would have never even taken this project on in the first place, which is why we have the resource. We aren't the private sector here in government. We're different. Our motives are different. The private sector exists to make money, to make a profit, and I would never begrudge anyone of that. But our charge is slightly different. While we want to be good stewards of the public finance, we are also here to, as Reese Sky said it, infuse life into neighborhoods. I don't think I've ever heard it put that well. That is a role that we're here to do. And it's about doing that throughout the entire city and in all neighborhoods. And so that's what this resource is for. So we will never quite get the right comparison between the private sector. It's never going to line up apples to apples. And I think I want to thank staff for giving a presentation that highlights that. There are restraints that come with this type of funding that, quite frankly, the private sector doesn't have to worry about. But I'm going to go even a step further. The private sector doesn't have the expertise to do this type of project either. There's another element of that I think that we have to be mindful of. The private sector, quite frankly, the funds that are brought to bear to this project can't be brought by the private sector. We have a fantastic partner in the Housing Authority that is an expert in obtaining this type of resource and financing to do this, and we have them here in Fresno, one of the finest housing authorities in the nation. We have here that has an expertise in getting this type of product, this type of resource to our communities. The private sector doesn't have that resource. And so you can't really compare. Not apples to apples, at least. If the private sector would have tried to do it, quite frankly, there's an argument that could be made that we still could potentially do it better on our side, or be very competitive if we did do a private sector apple to apples. But more than that, I want to talk about what this project means to this community and the partnership that we have with the Housing Authority. So a couple years ago, you all may remember, we had a fantastic discussion about the role of the Housing Authority in the city of Fresno and what we want them to do, and our challenges with the Housing Division and our challenges with HUD are well documented. And so we asked the Housing Authority to do certain things in our community. We asked them to help us as a city gain capacity with our community groups. So our community groups, like our Lowell CDC, would be able to have the capacity to go into neighborhoods and revitalize neighborhoods themselves. We asked the Housing Authority to do that. And they're doing that. Right now, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like when we ask the Housing Authority, the expert in this type of financing tool, to share that capacity with other organizations and groups. This is it right here. We also asked the Housing Authority to share that expertise with the private sector, because as you may remember a moment ago, I said that the private sector doesn't have this expertise. And they've done that too. There's 2 projects that are going to be coming up. One has already passed, another one's going to be getting funded, where they have shared this particular expertise with the private sector so that our private sector partners in this community gain the expertise in this as well. I say that because it's important to draw the distinction between just viewing this as a regular market project as opposed to what we're really asking our partners to do in our communities. It's a little different. And you guys are doing it, and I want to publicly thank the Housing Authority. I don't know how this is going to work out today, guys, but I thank you for going out on a limb, for partnering with our community groups, for partnering with the private sector, for bringing that resource to Fresno. I thank you for that, because without you all, it wouldn't be here. And I know our office, I think my chief of staff was telling me today, we've watched you guys do about 9 projects over the last few years. I mean, those are millions and millions of dollars that you all are bringing to be invested into our community that no one else would be able to do. So the $512,000 that you all have, I'm going to use them in air quotes, saved. I want to talk a little bit about that because the project's built off of estimates. So I don't want, I think we can estimate that there are $512,000 in savings there, but I asked my friends at the Housing Authority, I said, well, listen, let me play devil's advocate. We saved this money. Some would suggest that, the money was there all along to be saved. So why didn't we just do it in the beginning? And that was a good question that was asked, and I think we had a good debate about that. And the truth of the matter is they're not exactly sure, but they're hoping they can find those savings. But if, in fact, they're right with their initial estimates, the Housing Authority takes on all the risk of whatever the cost overruns may be. So I don't want my colleagues to think that in the event that their estimates are truer to form than what they initially thought, that the project in any way is going to lose out. The project's not going to lose out. The Housing Authority will simply just take the risk internally and make sure that the project ends up as described here. And I thank you guys for that too, in order for this to come back to us, your agency took on additional risk. But let's talk about what that risk means in the city of Fresno. So the Housing Authority, again, a little different than the private sector. See, every dollar the Housing Authority makes is reinvested into these projects. Sometimes things may be suggested otherwise, that you all are doing something with the money. Maybe Preston's taking a trip to Aruba or something like that. If you go, take me with you. But the truth of the matter is those dollars that they have, they reinvest those dollars and leverage those dollars time and time and time and time again right back into our community with projects that no one else will do. That's what they do with that resource, because we've talked a lot about the fees. Well, let's talk about it. That fee is reinvested back into our community. That fee, when the $500,000 that you need to have, when your cost overruns happen, they're able to use that money to reinvest back into those projects. They're able to use that money and enhance those neighborhoods. So I just want to be clear about how I view the project, how I view the role of the Housing Authority and the partnership that is being established with our community groups in the private sector. This is a role of reinvestment into communities. We're not, listen, my good friends in the private sector, when they do a project like this, I want them to make a ton of money. I really do. But I can't say for sure that every dollar is going to be reinvested back into our communities. I know that it is with the Housing Authority. So the $512,000 that was air quoted saved is really just additional risk that the Housing Authority has taken on in this project. So this is what the resource is for. We could have handled this better. And the Housing Authority has now taken on additional risk. The last thing I want to say before I turn it over to my colleagues is that, we can decide to reject the project today. And for those of us that want to have the philosophical debate about being stewards of the taxpayer dollar, it would be a hollow victory. Because the truth of the matter is, this resource would just go to another community and it wouldn't be Fresno. It just wouldn't go here. It's not like the tax credit application, the tax credits that are available to this would simply go to another community. I think the second community up is Merced. Is that right? Maybe? All right. Maybe I can't say that publicly because they're giving me the naughty look. But it wouldn't be here in Fresno. And so while I think that it's significant to be mindful about how we use our community resource, we as council members, in my opinion, again, should be fighting for every dollar we can to reinvest into the community, into our community, and not let those precious resources go to other communities. Those dollars, should this project go through, are going to be invested here. We're going to put Fresnans to work. We're going to help revitalize our community. Those dollars, should we not take them, will simply go somewhere else and put another community's folks to work. We will revitalize another community's neighborhood. And so I put that on the minds of my colleagues. I think that there have been things to make the project better, and I applaud all the effort that it took to get here today, because I know over the weekend there were some marathon sessions to really crunch numbers on the part of staff and my colleagues on the dais here. But I think that we can agree that the project isn't perfect, but it's better. And we got to be very careful about sacrificing the perfect for the good. So with that, I will wait to hear the discussion from my colleagues, but I don't know how this is going to fall today, but I just felt like at least it was important for me to give my perspective on what we're doing here today. So, Councilmember Brand, I will make a motion to approve the project. All right, Councilmember Brand, you're up.
I'd go back to last week, and my vote against it was not necessarily a total rejection of the project. It was basically a technical, based on, in my opinion, a lack of facts and a lack of explanation on a lot of the stuff that was out there. I want to thank the city manager and the mayor and Preston and Tracewell and others who met with me on Friday and literally carried discussions late into the night, even over the weekend, to answer a lot of the questions that I had about the project. And as a result of those discussions and deliberations, the Housing Authority was willing to reduce the overall cost of this project from about $6.8 million to $6.3 million. That's $500,000. That's a substantial change, and that includes realigning line item construction costs. And again, it's just an estimate. Soft costs, including the development fee. So that was a step in the right direction. And I know this is an old subject, the city on our housing, but I think this project really reinforced the need to really reevaluate how we do housing in the city of Fresno, in particular affordable housing. And I would like to see in the future a better presentation that includes, for example, pictures. Once I saw the pictures that were given to me over the weekend, it's obvious this place was in pretty bad shape. And I didn't expect it to be in great shape, but it's in worse shape than I thought it would be. And that would also explain some of the higher cost figures. Having a more detailed cost breakdowns, including a line item construction budget, having what you had today, the comparable cost per square foot per unit of other projects, puts things in a lot more perspective in terms of where we're going. Even having, if you guys, a peer review possibly in the future where you can maybe refine some of the real rough estimates to something a little closer to get us a better judge. And as my colleague Oliver said, the Housing Authority is willing to absorb the risk and the cost, and I appreciate that, because there's someone who's done these projects over the years. I realize all the risk that goes along when you take on a particularly an older project. And this entire affordable housing tax credit process, it's just everything is counterintuitive to the way I have done things in the private sector, which is reduce costs, find efficiencies, and literally, it's not exaggeration, but in the scoring system for tax credits, the more money you spend, the more bells and whistles, the more competitive you get. And basically higher debt, all the stuff that would be just, again, illogical in the world I live in, but I understand it. And I have to be realistic in how things are done here. And it's difficult to find any private developer to take on that risk in these very, very chancy, risky projects that develop in areas that are still developing. And some of the items that I identified that help explain some of the issues were, I knew the hazardous materials, anytime you're doing a rehab, in fact, and I hate to say this, Mr. Baines, in Hotel Fresno, it's actually more expensive to rebuild an existing complex than to tear it down and build it from the ground. The appliances and the HVAC have to be energy efficient, higher SEER rated applications, and that costs more money. But that's the nature of the game that you have to do to be competitive in this process. There's relocation fees. I guess there's 15 or 16 existing tenants, and I know when you do this, you have to spend money and bring them back. And I know better than anybody Calaveras Street. We had a property for a number of years we managed there. It was always a challenge. We have managed there for probably 7 or 8 years, but that area I know has got a lot of crime and drugs and gangs and all the stuff that was described here. I knew it firsthand because I had some staff that didn't even want to go out there and show units when the manager, we were trying to find an on-site manager that was really in fear of their life to go out there and work there. So I understand fully the challenges of the Lowell area. But conversely, we just simply can't just build units out there and make them look nice. You have to invest in the management part of it. You got to get the tenants that take responsibility, that live in that community, that don't join gangs and don't get engaged in criminal activity. Otherwise, it'll be all for naught. And I know there's a big investment of the Lowell community in the area. And I said last time too that we need to still work and focus on more home ownership and getting people vested in the community and not having it probably, I'm just guessing, probably 80-90% rentals, where typical neighborhoods in Fresno are about probably 75 to 80% homeowner and about 25-30% maybe renters. But there's more stability in home ownership. There's a pride that's there. So in the end, really, the overall cost of roughly 6.3 is, most of it, really $5 million, is from the tax credit, and those are investors. They're taking the risk in this deal. Of course, they're getting beneficial tax treatment on it as an incentive. So really a smaller portion is coming from the home loan, which is reduced to $100,000. So in theory, we have $100,000 more someplace else. And of course, the housing authority on their portion has been reduced. But for me personally, having understand the program and having the benefit of a lot of hours over the weekend to better understand the challenges. And I did speak to a couple private developers. Terrence Frazier is one of them, who's been involved as a private developer, and explaining to me what he ran into. And he had the same exact questions, the same exact doubts that I had on some of these costs. And he says, Lee, when I finish this project, I'm glad I had a reserve, because there were things I just never planned on. And I see that in this process. So in the end, in our role as stewards, we can't forsake, a population that's clearly in need of affordable housing and decent neighborhoods. And to me, it never was an ideological. It was always about policy, fiscal management, and there's a huge vacuum in the development expertise within the private sector. And as we try to recover as a community and to move forward, in Lowell and in so many other neighborhoods, southeast, southwest, we need to win back, every neighborhood, house by house, block by block. And I think that in the future, what we're doing here with the CDC, we need to set up CHOTAs really in every area of probably not my area, Fresno, but just about every area of Fresno needs this capability, this citizen involvement, this engagement, so that it doesn't rely always on one agency, the Housing Authority, to come in and meet the need. But I think it's if we move forward, I'd like to see some changes so we don't have to have second meetings and weekend conversations. And I think everybody's learned in this process, I'm hoping at least. So anyway, I have a different approach on this project, and based on the changes that I've seen come forward, I'm willing to support the project. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Brandon. I'd just like to note for the record that you did manage to work in a Hotel Fresno comment in your remarks. So anyway, Councilmember Soria.
Thank you, Council President. So I want to make a few comments. I have still a number of questions, but I first do want to say thank you to our Council President for the comments that he made. I share many of them, and also my council colleague Brand, who raised some very valid points in the last meeting in terms of maximizing every single dollar, and those were part of my comments last time in terms of folks know that I am a strong supporter of affordable housing, and that I recognize the need of increasing our affordable housing stock here in the city of Fresno. And so I shared or I supported this item this last meeting really hesitantly because I did see some valid points raised by my council colleague as it relates to cost, and just going through some of the changes that you guys made, and sitting down with the Housing Authority last Friday just to get a little bit more detail. I appreciate that. I appreciate the work that that you guys went through in the last few days to try to crunch down and try to see where there are cost savings. But I do want to kind of stress, and I know that it was a point made by our council president, in terms of the process, and I just want to restate it because this is important to me in terms of how we bring projects forth, and are we waiting to the 11th hour? I don't want to go through this again next year, and this has been kind of a recurring theme over the last couple months or last month as we've been dealing with the consolidated plan, as we've been dealing with the action plan, and how we are rolling out these really important dollars. These are important dollars that we're receiving in the city of Fresno because there is an existing need in terms of poverty and really blight and a number of issues that are in neighborhoods throughout our city. And so I just wanted to make that point again so that we're not waiting again until the 11th hour, and that we do have all the information ahead of time as it relates to any future affordable housing projects. So I have a couple questions, and maybe I'll start off with Jennifer as it relates to just the timeline. I think I asked this again. I don't know if there's going to be enough support for this project. So what happens if this project is not approved today with the $1.3 million?
So if this project is not supported today, or if the tax credits are not awarded by the tax credit agency, we would issue a new notice of funding availability, and we would go back through the process, and any eligible project could apply for funds, and then we would come back to this body probably in the fall so that they would be able to be competitive for the March tax credit round. So essentially these funds would then be not obligated. We need to obligate those funds by next year. So we have, last year we were ahead of the game. We obligated them. The agency was not able to secure the financing. We said we would reissue a notice of funding availability, which we did. This project that you're hearing today, the Lowell Neighborhood Project, was selected as the most responsive. If it is not committed today, or if the tax credits are not awarded, we would begin that process again.
So we're not jeopardizing our ability to utilize the $1.3 million for any other project?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, perfect. The other question that I had related to the cost in terms of impact fees. I know that they're only 100,000, but what portion of the city are those impact fees? Do we
So
have
the
that
only
number?
impact fees that apply are the ones for the new construction. Obviously, the existing project is a substantial rehabilitation, but there are no new impact fees assessed for that particular project. So the 8 units that are being constructed on the Glen site would be subject to impact fees. I can let the Housing Authority speak a little more about the delicate balance between waiving of fees and how that impacts your tax credit basis and whether or not you can qualify to attract more financing to the deal by not having those fees waived. But we have discussed the opportunity and the possibility that this project may qualify for our TOD deferral program or payment of those impact fees through another source. So that is a possibility as we get closer to construction and syndication of the project before that final determination is made.
And so I raised that question because, in looking at trying to maximize every dollar or make sure that the cost per unit is lessened, as it seems like you guys were able to accomplish over the last 3 days. While it may be minimal, I feel that this is obviously in terms of creating more affordable housing, seems like it would be an issue that we would want to explore. In terms of incentivizing, and I'm not just saying for the Fresno Housing Authority, but when we're looking at projects, even with other developers, I know that I believe this week we're going to be meeting with the I Defer committee, and we continuously waive impact fees for industrial development. I will say that I have a heartache doing it every single time because we're waiving thousands of dollars, but it seems like when we're looking at the value of the project and what it's going to do for the neighborhood, in exploring that. And you mentioned that there may be an implication in terms of how much money comes in. We are already seeing that even though now with the reduction in terms of, or the savings of 500,000, 100,000 coming from the one, or being reduced in the, is it 100,000 from the 1.3, right? We're saving that. Then the tax credits also go down proportionally. Is that correct?
Right. So what we're trying to do is to maximize the resources that are coming in for the project, and obviously there is an opportunity to utilize our TOD program for this particular project based on the densities. However, it would reduce the overall cost of the project and therefore the amount of tax credits that could be brought in, and then we wouldn't be able to use those TOD waivers for another project. So essentially we're tying up 2 sources of city funds in one project rather than leveraging additional resources by separating those 2 sets of funds. So it's really a policy decision, but we would strongly encourage at this point that decision not be made until after the award of the tax credits to determine whether or not there are additional opportunities for reduction in cost or a value engineering of the project. And at that point, we could introduce the additional concept of a TOD waiver when they were closer to construction, if it was necessary at that time.
Okay, I also have just a couple questions to the Lowell CDC folks. So as I understand in terms of the project, you guys are partners with the Fresno Housing Authority, and you guys are splitting the developer fees. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so just wanting to get a sense of what is it that you guys are planning to do with the funds that you guys are receiving. I understand from just the general information that has been given, the comments have been build capacity. What does that mean? What is it going to do? What are you guys doing in terms of in the area with those funds, or do you guys have kind of a general plan that you can speak to?
We have a we have a pretty diverse board that has met together and discussed and debated important housing issues in the Lowell neighborhood, and even as well as what would it look like to use now our resources and knowledge that we're gaining to go outside of our neighborhood and improve housing. So some of the major priorities, main goals of our neighborhood is to improve or increase home ownership. And in our neighborhood, it's not like we have a lot of houses that are up for sale. We have a lot of homes that are sitting, boarded up, not being utilized. We have homes that when they do go up for sale, they are in such status that the average person cannot take a mortgage on it. So these are things that we're looking into. Like, what would it look like if we had the funds to leverage, let's say, purchasing an old house that was built in 1920 that's on the market for $60,000, but you can't get a mortgage for it because it needs $40,000 in rehab work. What would it look like for us to partner with a homeowner? We've had 3 or 4 homes in the neighborhood that we've been able to partner with private developers who bought those homes in cash, negotiated with the homeowner of what they could afford for a mortgage, invested money to rehab those homes, and then sold them back for the amount that those families could afford a mortgage with. Those are some of the things. Another huge need in our neighborhood is responsible property management. And so those are that is very complicated endeavor, but what we have learned is we have several great property owners, and we have a very few who aren't so great to own the majority of our properties in our neighborhood. So using some of the capacity and all of this takes time. The Lowell CDC is made up of volunteer board members. We hired one staff person who just needed to step out, and she should be the one answering these questions because she knows more of the details. Esther Delahaye. But when she returned, she could address some of the work that she's been doing. But she has been, partnering with the Housing Authority to learn all the ins and outs of these tax credits, what it looks like to purchase a property and rehab that is not something that private investors can do. So some of this money is going towards paying for her as well as other staff resources. So the question was, what is the Lowell CDC going to do with the development fees that we gain out of this project?
So I'm sorry about that. The money will be spent on our to further our mission and to further our 2 priorities, which are increase home ownership and, as Barb stated very clearly, increase the quality of housing at affordable rates. So there's a lot of different ways that we can do those things, and we're moving forward with different ideas.
That's some of the ideas as mentioned by Barbara in terms of purchasing some vacant homes and then, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So for myself, I've kind of outlined the pros and cons in terms of looking at the project as a whole. And so as I see, there's, with the $1.2 million in home funds, we are bringing close to the $5 million in outside money, which I made this statement last time. I think that's great that we're able to leverage our own dollars that we're getting to bring outside. So great thing. We've seen actually a little bit of a reduction given the cost savings that we've made with reducing some of the line or the itemized estimated construction costs that you guys laid out. I also understand that this project, as mentioned by many of the individuals that live in this area, we're targeting an area that has some great need, and we've seen a lot of crime and blight in that neighborhood. So it's a great thing to be able to, create a project that will address that and help us eliminate some of those negative aspects that exist in the neighborhood. We also know that the Housing Authority has a very good record of winning the tax credit allocations. The city has actually given other developer opportunities for this funding, but they had really lacked the ability to put adequate financing packages together that would meet the tax credit criteria, and I believe that was mentioned in our last meeting. So we see that there's some definitely benefits from the project. I will mention some of the cons that I also just want to point out and really consider and see if you guys can help me in addressing some of them. So in terms of some of the cost savings, I noticed that that you guys there's a reduction in terms of the installation. So we went from 6,000 to 1,500, and maybe you guys can speak to this. But what does that mean in terms of PG&E bills, the energy savings? If we're making that significant reduction, what does that mean for the individuals in those homes?
Thanks for asking the question. To give you a little bit of background, when we worked with our estimator and our construction management department to come back and give us some different estimates or some more refined estimates, if you will. That is one of the areas based on experience that our construction management department felt that we could get a better price on, not necessarily reduce the quality or the amount of the insulation or of the component. Also, just to kind of provide a little bit more information on the energy efficiency of the project, the Tax Credit Allocation Committee and the regulations surrounding that actually require that we produce and prove higher efficiency than is average.
So are you telling us that with the $1,500 cost per unit versus the $6,000 that you had, you're still going to be able to meet those requirements?
Overall, with our entire budget, yes, we have to meet those requirements.
So why the big difference? And I think we need to just kind of speak to it, because if the public is listening and they're seeing how, in 3 days we've been able to do a cost savings of $500,000, I think the public should know kind of, why were numbers inflated, or, how we kind of break it down.
Sure, there's a great deal of effort and information and detail that goes into how we do all of our construction estimates. So we started out with overall construction estimates, line item by line item, back in January. Those get refined over time. And also, as you think about the components or how each of those line items, what goes into each of those line items, some of the items that maybe were presented as a line item in your original package may have been composed differently or comprised differently. So when we went back, we tried to make it like for like, if you will, apples to apples, so that you would see the actual insulation cost, or I think there's one line item that says perhaps mirror or cabinets. And so to take a look at those particular items. So what we also do is we always do whatever we can, and again, this is a public bidding process, so we come up with some estimates, we have our architect put together the drawings, and we put this out for public bid. So each line item may come in, slightly over or slightly under our original estimate, our original bid, but in the end, it drives down to the overall cost of the project and the construction cost. So in this particular item, I realized that it went from, I apologize, I don't have the number right in front of me. There was a significant reduction in the insulation line item.
6,000 to 1,500 per unit.
So I realized there was a significant reduction in that particular line item. And again, we were trying to do apples to apples. And in the end, what we drive to is the best possible price on every single line item, all rolled up into a construction budget. And I think that, as Councilmember Baines pointed out before, while the Housing Authority is willing to take the risk of the reduction in the overall cost of the project, there are many things that, as they come up through the process of construction and as we do our draws with our investors, that you may end up with some savings along the way. And those savings generally go into a contingency, in which case we have a conversation with our investor at the end about what to do with those savings.
Thank you. The other thing I wanted to point out, so we've seen in the last few days a cost savings of say about $500,000. So, and I know that if there's any additional cost savings, they're in no way credited back to the city. So, is there a plan for any additional cost savings? I would personally like to see some written condition that any extra profits or cost savings would be either reinvested into the project or retained in the property. And I would like to see that somewhere either written in whatever agreement that are created between the city and the Fresno Housing Authority.
So if we do see, I think if I understand your question or your thoughts, that if we see additional cost savings beyond the 500 that we already are hoping to achieve, that you are hoping that that then is returned to the city?
No. That
it's kept.
I
in the
know
project?
that in no way it's going to come back to the city. At least,
okay.
That's my understanding. But rather than it go to any admin,
it does not. Yes,
that it would actually somewhere written. I would feel much more comfortable that it would be somewhere written saying that any cost savings would be reinvested into the project or retained for property reserves.
You bet. So that actually does happen. It's part of our agreement with the investor. So the investor is required to approve all of our expenditures, and they require that it either we together with the investor come up with an appropriate way to spend that money. I think I mentioned at one point that in one of our other projects we actually we had some savings, so we put solar on a project, but that was negotiated with our investor who has ultimate approval, the investor that brings in the $5 million. So it does actually stay in the project, and it does not go to the Housing Authority overhead or admin. It is part of what's called the limited partnership agreement.
So is that something that we could put in an agreement that we do with you guys? Or how does that happen? I know that you said you have it with the tax credit? Or
yes, it is with the investor. It's through the limited partnership agreement. All of that is outlined in a several hundred-page document. I'm not sure exactly. I don't know the details of the agreement with the city, but we can certainly see if that is language that the investor will allow, because the investor also has to approve that agreement.
So should Jennifer be answering that question, or maybe Bruce?
If I can just clarify, so the city attorney is involved in the closing and does review the partnership agreement, and so anything that talks about the use of funds is reviewed by the city attorney as part of closing. So
is that something that we could include in the agreement?
It's already included.
It's already included?
Yeah, it's already included, and the city attorney does have the chance to make sure that it's there. So,
okay.
Thanks.
So just to kind of wrap my comments, and I appreciate the answers to the questions that I have, and so just want to again be clear with everyone in terms of I'm a strong supporter of affordable housing, and I understand the needs that exist in our community. Let's also be clear. I know that there was a number of folks here speaking, on behalf of the neighborhood on Calaveras, but there are many Calaveras streets out in the city of Fresno. I know I have some Calaveras streets in my area in terms of the types of neighborhoods that we're trying to impact. And I know that I have Highway City, that I have a number of housing apartment complexes on Pleasant Avenue that have these needs. And so while I believe, that this is an area that will benefit, let's just be clear that there are many children in the city of Fresno in other neighborhoods like this. So this is not the only end. So what I want to see, I want to make sure that that we look at that, and that we don't come back around in the next cycle and not look at those other neighborhoods that are not maybe in the downtown area. I would like to see some projects in my district where the children of those neighborhoods are also benefiting from these investments from our home funds, but also these outside investments that come from these tax credits. I will say that we've heard that currently the current process really is what ties our hands to these high costs because we have to meet all these federal requirements. And so I know that, we can easily say, well, the federal government is tying our hands and maybe we need to send them a message. But I also believe that rather than just sending a message, I think that we need to really sit down with our federal leaders here, if it's Jim Costa or our other congressmen, to talk about how really we can maximize every single dollar that comes from our federal government, because we are seeing that the issue of prevailing wage does increase some of our project costs for I think about 30%, and so we know we're going to continue with trying to address the issue of increasing the affordable housing stock, and these dollars are going to be there. So then we have to find a way and a mechanism to improve that process and improve our ability to be able to maximize. So we can't just put a blind eye to the issue and continue forth doing things like we usually do, but also having that conversation at the same time as we're looking at this next funding cycle, as we're going to be dealing with other future projects. And so I would encourage, and I'm willing to initiate some of those meetings with some of our Congress representatives so that we're talking about how we can improve the current process that really ties our hands and increases these costs that could, again, help us in creating more affordable housing stock for the city of Fresno. I will say that I'm going to listen to my council colleagues in terms of their additional comments. I do want to thank again my council colleague, Councilmember Brand, for raising some of the issues in the last meeting and really making this special meeting happen again, because I think these are important issues that we need to really flesh out and talk about. So I will be listening to my other council colleagues. Thank you.
Councilmember Olivier.
Thank you, Council President Baines, council colleagues, city staff, City Manager Rudd. I wanted to begin by thanking the people who've worked so hard to put this deal together. So I wanted to thank the folks at the Lowell CDC. I want to thank our city staff who've worked so hard, and I also wanted to thank Preston and Tracewell and the folks at the Housing Authority, because I know they've put a lot of effort into this project. I wanted to first begin by stating my agreement with the aims and goals of this Calaveras and also the Glen project. I completely agree that we're talking about not just a street or a neighborhood or a whole region of our city that is in need of an infusion of life, like we heard, an infusion of funds, an infusion of belief, and people to believe in a neighborhood and a street and a region. So I don't disagree with those aims. In fact, I agree with them wholeheartedly. Over the past 5 years that I've been on the council, I've seen wonderful things happen in Lowell. I've seen neighbors helping neighbors. I've seen the beginnings of a significant transformation, and I've been able to participate in some of the votes that have affected that neighborhood, and I've been able to participate in actually some of the events that are transforming people's hearts and are transforming the neighborhood. And I'm really pleased to see that work. I have voted for the last 4, as Preston has pointed out to me. I've voted for the last 4 projects brought to this body by the Fresno Housing Authority because they do bring good projects. They bring projects that make sense, and they bring projects that are something that I can get behind. And so that's why I've always offered my support to what Housing Authority has done. I've looked at the numbers of this project. I've actually had 2 more additional meetings than what the council has participated in. I've been very fortunate to have been included in on those meetings with Councilmember Brand and City Manager Bruce Rudd, and they've really gone the extra mile to explain the entire situation to me. And so, although I've looked at the same numbers, the construction costs, and I've taken a look at the operational model, I've determined that the project is too risky to invest taxpayer money in including the home funds, and so I'll be voting no on the project today. A no vote doesn't mean that I'd rather see these federal dollars spent in Austin or Toledo or Denver. I just prefer that we spent it better here in Fresno. For me, it's still too expensive. And the flurry of last-minute changes that have been made to satisfy some members of this body still do not inspire confidence in me. So I will not be voting in support today. I do understand the difference between private industry and the private market and constructing things outside of government, and when government builds things. And so I realize that things are more expensive, that the costs are higher when the government builds things. And that's just part of what is done, and that's the way it goes. So the reason why I'm voting no isn't because, well, we could tear this building down in the private sector and start over and build it for a fraction of the cost of what we're doing here. That's not why I'm opposed. I realize that things cost more when we do prevailing wage. I realize that government procurement processes cost more. So that's not the reason why I'm not in support. I just think that it's the changes are too little, too late for me, and it won't be something that I can support. But I did want to thank everyone involved in it for bringing it forward, and my colleagues on the council, and City Manager Rudd for including me in those meetings. Thank you.
Councilmember Quintero.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to thank you, Preston and Tracewell, for reaching out to me over the weekend. And sometimes there's other things that take precedence over last-minute calls, but I do appreciate it, and also for the information that you emailed me. And Esther, thank you also for your email. And Barbara, thank you as well. It was a very good email you sent me, and in explaining and outlining the program itself and how it relates to Lowell, and so I really appreciated that, and it's a good chronological order. I really appreciate that a lot. You know, the concerns that I hear from my colleagues to some degree today is that of the process and how frustrating it is, and the costs and that type of thing. And it reminded me of an old quote that says, "Don't hate the player, hate the game." So it's not about housing authority; it's a process that makes this very, very frustrating. The part that concerns me is or parts, I should say, that concern me are, this is a big project, and there's a lot of money being invested in this, and then to get it at the last minute. You know, I don't know who decided that to bring it to us, but even a phone call to say, hey, this is coming up, do you have any questions? That would have been helpful, you know, and so that part is, you know, I guess that's what caused all the last-minute clarification and changes. But one of the things that that concerns me over all the projects, and I have supported, like Councilmember Olivier says, you know, the last projects that have come before council with regards to the concerns, even with the concerns that were had, is, and it's a question that I always ask, okay, so you're building affordable housing in the way of apartments, but what about home ownership? Home ownership, you know, to me, there's no, or one of the best feelings in realizing the American dream is owning your own home. And what I see is if Habitat for Humanity can do it and work with the residents and qualify folks to own their own home, and they're a lot smaller than Housing Authority, why couldn't you folks do some of that to help folks get into their own home? Because I've worked with Habitat and the projects that they've built in Southeast Fresno. They work with the residents and or the owners as they get their house in order, but also with their financial statements to help them qualify. So I mean, I don't know if these monies qualify for that, but maybe that's something that I think is important to look into. The other part that I feel very strongly about that stabilizes the neighborhood, being that Lowell is an older neighborhood, and we have neighborhoods similar to that in Southeast Fresno. We have Butler and Hazelwood is a good example. You know, why can't monies be put into rehabilitating some of those homes that the owner's been there 30 or 40 years, and being that it's an older home, they need a new roof, they need a paint job, they're getting older, and they have their physical capabilities are limited, and they probably need a ramp because those older homes had stairs to them. And so they would need a ramp to get up there. And to me, by helping neighbors like that have invested in that neighborhood over the years, that would be helpful for them, and it would also help the neighborhood. I mean, you've got seniors, veterans, disabled folks in all neighborhoods. And I think that would be helpful. That would help the neighborhood. That would help reduce crime. And even landlords that are in those neighborhoods, be they slum landlords or decent landlords, that will help them invest a little bit more into their property to clean it up and get a little bit higher rent. So, you know, that's and it just seems like whenever I ask, what about single-family housing? You know, every time there's a presentation, I get the wink, the smile, and the okie dokie, Sal, we'll look into it. You know, but it's never mentioned. It's never brought up or say we're developing a program to do that. And believe me, with the type of economy that we've had in the past few years, there's a lot of homeowners that are struggling that could really use that help. I remember in the 90s, Mr. Rudd, and you'll recall that as well. We did have a home rehab program here. We did, and it helped the Lane neighborhood immensely. You know, and then slowly it kept going away. And if these monies can be used for that, I'd like to see that some of those monies directed to that. As far as the housing goes, single-family housing. There's an older project. It's a rectangular-shaped piece of property north of Olive on Palm. Those houses were built in the 40s, and they look great. And those are probably rentals now, but they take care of them. You've got some green space between the houses, and that they've maintained themselves over the years. That could be a single-family project. They have some out in Fowler that were built in the 90s, a very narrow street, but they look good, and they've been maintained very, very well. And it just seems that you know, we want to help folks to help them realize the American dream, but also stabilize the neighborhoods. And there's no greater way to do it, and no greater feeling than owning your own home. So, I mean, it just, like I said, it just seems that every time I ask about it, okay, and then next time, here they come, more apartments. You know, the other part too is that I see is you're working to stabilize the neighborhood, help the downtown area, but if you're bringing folks in that need affordable housing, you know, you want to diversify the income in an area as well, and I don't know that this is doing that. There's a lot of little things that I feel can be done. So anyway, I want to hear what the rest of my colleagues have to say. Thank you.
Councilmember Capriello.
Thank you, Council President. First, I want to apologize to everyone for being late. I had 4 different cases set in Superior Court, Fresno County, and I could not avoid that. It's ironic because this is a part-time job, but it's become a full-time job. And the law business has suffered as in the sense of being part-time if I'm lucky. But I'm sorry for being late, and I enjoy my full-time job as a city councilman and sharing these moments with my colleagues and trying to do the right thing for the entire community of Fresno, the entire city. Some observations I have is, one, I think there's got to be a change in policy. I think for 2.5 years you've heard me say this over and over. We need advance notice. We need to have the information well in advance of the agenda coming out. The more complicated, the more notice we need. That gives us the time and opportunity to review and understand and ask questions and ask more questions. So hopefully, not just with your division, but with the entire city, we get this information more and more in advance. It just makes for better government and better decisions, better policy making. And I've been saying that for 2.5 years, so I think this is a good example of why we need to have that. And I also think, playing off of Sal's comments, the okey-doke Sal period has to come to an end as well. If you, I said if the okey-doke Sal era has to come to an end. In other words, if we have questions and things for you and other departments, please give us a straightforward answer. If you can do it, fine. If you can't, let's try to figure out an alternative. Let's figure out ways to get the job done other than just placating us with a okey doke. I had a couple of questions. By the way, I've been briefed by my Chief of Staff. I have the PowerPoint presentation. I've had an opportunity to review that and discuss this issue with members of the Housing Authority, so I have the background so far. But the 2 questions I forgot to ask in the course of this event was, how long have we been working in the Lowell neighborhood? How many years? Does anybody know? Well, just the whole process. I'm sure we've been involved with the residents in their efforts to revive their community. Yeah. But it seems like it's been, when I was here in 08, 09, I remember Lowell neighborhood coming up on council dialogue.
So residents in that community have been working as residents to advocate for the community for 20 plus years now. The Lowell Neighborhood Association has had lots of different forms there. It was the Lowell Jefferson Consortium, I think, at one time. Then it's become the Lowell Neighborhood Association. There's been Union de Familias, which is the Spanish-speaking group of residents there that meet sometimes more often than not. And then the Lowell Community Development Corporation was founded in 2011. As we know, the mayor came into office in 2008, and that's when the Lowell Neighborhood Association had given the mayor what we called the Blight Report at that point and said, here's our top properties that we'd like to focus on. So there's been a lot of work in that area over the last, I would say, 20 years, really.
And we partnered with them for a substantial period of the 20 years, or?
The Housing Authority partnered?
The Housing Authority, the City of Fresno, government in general.
There's been partnerships all along the way.
Okay.
Yes.
And then do we know how much the total amount of federal, state, and local dollars that have been invested in the Lowell, Jefferson, La Familia?
I don't have that number.
Is there any way we could find out on that?
I don't know. That would probably be a
City manager, is there some way to figure out the?
We could certainly come back and provide you an outline of what's been spent in Lowell, Ucomie, El Dorado, all of the above.
Well, that would be helpful, but I'm particularly interested in the Lowell neighborhood. It's, like I said, from 08, 09, when I had my first adventure here in City Hall. I remember Lowell coming up, Lowell Jefferson, and it just goes on and on and on. I know it's millions and millions of dollars. I'd just like to somehow get a general gross total of that, if you would, please. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. It appears to me that these federal dollars, from the dialogue that we've had today and in the past, they're very complicated. It's hard to hit all the marks that they want you to hit to get those dollars. And then when we get the dollars, they expect us to spend them in a certain way, to do the things that are contrary and against the grain of what the council and the administration, I believe, have been brought up to expect from projects. We expect to have a great project at the right amount of dollars with the most effective use of time, energy, and funds. And the federal aspect of this just doesn't seem to hit that very hard or very well. And it's very, very difficult and actually frustrating for us. I can't speak for all my members up here, but I think we all share that thought. You need the biggest bang for your buck. You got to stretch those dollars. You got to get as much out of them as you can, because I think we're still in a recession. We're doing better, but I don't think we're out of the woods yet. So, and we have to continue to strive to get out of those woods. But in the process, the federal government seems to just ignore that and continue with their opinion and what they think is right for all of us. And we know in Fresno, I've said this often, we know what's right for Fresno. We know what we need, and we know how to get it done. But it's financing. So the federal dollars are needed, and if we can invest approximately 1.3 to get 5.4 back, that's a reasonable investment, notwithstanding the federal complications, the federal requirements, all the things they place upon us, which takes a lot of staff time, it takes a lot of energy, but I think in the long run, on balancing, again, we have to balance. That's a major part of our job here, is to balance. So I think on balance, the federal dollars and the benefits in the local community justify supporting this project, and that's one of the reasons I supported it last week. So I think that's a difficult balancing process, again, because of our nature to really get the most out of our dollars. We have to do that. We've all been raised that way, quite frankly. But here comes the federal government and throws a wrench in the gears, and makes it real difficult for us to reach some good conclusions here. Also, I've seen the success in El Dorado Park from these funds, and the hopefully continued efforts at El Dorado Park. And like everyone else, we all have Calaveras streets throughout the city, way too many, but we're working on it. Restore Fresno is on course. We hope to get there sooner than later. And I have Sierra Madre, for instance, just south of Shaw between Cedar and Maple. It's another Calaveras street. So we all have those issues, and we need that help, and we really appreciate your help. And we need to keep it coming and keep it going, because it takes a teamwork, team effort to get where we want to go. So with that, I will continue my support.
Councilmember Brandow.
All right. Kind of different going last. I get to hear kind of the way council's going, and I might be the voice of dissent this morning, so be patient with me if I am. Those of you that have heard voices of dissent before, it's not always fun to be in that position. You'd much rather be in the winning or prevailing position, but I'll just start by saying I have great people in the room today, great comments, motives are fantastic. And when people's motives are good, then I can appreciate what they're striving for. But I want to talk a little bit about projects like this in our city and in our country. And sometimes I talk on a grander scale than people think that I should talk about as a Fresno City Councilman. I think people would like just for me to restrict my comments only to what happens right here in our four walls. But I want to talk a little bit about the cost of being disconnected when we willingly support apartment units that cost $226,000 a piece, or adjusted $210,000 a piece for apartment units. And what happens when we vote for that stuff? Well, we see that a lot of people disconnect from government. So that disconnection is very real. So people feel like government is not serving them. And then the few people that get the benefit, they're in love with government for a very short time until they need something else. But by and large, people sit back and roll their eyes, and they can't believe the government is going to fix apartment units for the price of a house in the city of Fresno, a real nice house. So that disconnection really bothers me. It's one of the reasons I ran for office. I feel like it's one of the reasons I got voted into office, and so I have to talk about that a little bit today. But I did listen to a lot of the comments from my fellow council members. Councilman Brand hopes the process will be improved. To me, this is like pitching a penny in a wishing well. I suggest we're going to be back here next year voting on a real similar expensive apartment complex. Council Member Soria, at least, is willing to talk with members of Congress to correct some of the onerous regulations that apply to these projects. And I would be glad to help you if we could especially remove the prevailing wage requirement, which makes all of these projects very difficult for our citizens to swallow. But I want to talk more than any of that. I want to talk about a little bit about the war on poverty that we experience here in the city of Fresno and in our country. The war on poverty was started somewhere in the 50s by Lyndon Johnson, and it saw success for about a decade and a half. But since 1970, the poverty rate has essentially stayed the same, between 12 and 15%. In other words, Barbara, we're not helping poor people. That's right. Okay? So we get behind these government projects that aren't really helping people. And to give you an idea, I would say that if you allowed somebody to compete for these type of projects, and I'm not casting objections to people in the room, that's their job to complete these projects for our city. And but if you allowed people to compete for these, instead of 30 units, I've got one developer who's told me he could build 104. So this is what I mean, is really helping people that are in desperate need in our city and around the country. And as long as we continue to do this across our country, and even if we denied it, as some of my fellow council members have said, if we deny it in Fresno, it gets picked up in Merced. If we deny it in Fresno, it gets picked up in Toledo or Baltimore or wherever. Until we all get together and tackle that project, we are not going to be helping poor people in the city of Fresno or anywhere else. So, I have a lot of issues with the finances of this project. Okay, it's way too expensive. It causes the voters to lose contact with their government and trust with their government. Okay, and then that has an awful price. So we start with a war on poverty. If you Google war on poverty, you're going to find out that most people from the right and the left both believe we've lost the war on poverty. Then we move to a war on terror. We lost that. We move to a war on drugs. We lost that. The way this government is operating is nonsensical. And when you continue down this pathway, the ultimate goal or the ultimate end game is to end up where Greece is today, where you default, where your government defaults on its people and its obligations. Now, I'm not saying that the United States of America is going to become Greece, but I'll tell you what, the road that we're going down is very damaging to our economy and to our people. And so I'm not going to be supporting the project today.
All right. Just wanted to, in my final comments, just wanted to say one final comment about the council member had asked if we can reprogram these funds, and that in fact is true. I just will remind council, like Councilmember Capriolio said, that we could reprogram the $1.2 million, but we certainly will be sacrificing the $5 million of investment, the investor investment in the community. So I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that. And I want to echo some of, especially Councilmember Quintero's comments about using the home resource for single-family homes and individual projects. City Manager, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, a couple of things. First of all, in response to Councilmember Quintero's, and I'm not winking, so for this, the action plan that the council approved last week includes about $1.5 million for home rehab projects. And then remember, Ms. Clark talked about, we're changing the program from a loan to a grant in order to qualify more individuals. And we have, I'm looking at Joe, 20 packages right now with the EOC? Somewhere around there. You don't need to get up, Joe. But my point is that we are going to put money into home rehab projects, as you had suggested. We also what was that? Throughout the city. We also doubled the amount of senior housing, senior paint program, which gets the ramp from $50,000 to $100,000. I also want, and I don't foresee this upcoming year another similar project, but I am painfully aware of what the position we've put, the staff, by putting things in front of you in the last minute, and at the end of the day, that buck stops here. And if there is another project, I'm going to sit here today. You will have right to hold me to my feet to the proverbial fire, because we will not bring you another project like this in the last minute. I am telling you today, this is the last one, and you can take that to the bank. So I just want to make that clear, and I appreciate your patience, and I also appreciate the community's patience with us. I spoke to some firefighters the other day about the difference between what they do and what we do is that on any given day, we walk off of here and go, could have, should have, or would have. This is one of those where we could have done better, we should have done better, and we will.
Thanks, City Manager. I appreciate you saying that. I think I can speak for several of my colleagues that your word means a lot. So we certainly will be holding you to that. So I wanted to ask that for Councilmember Quintero's benefit. Him and I certainly agree on that use of funding for home dollars, and I know Councilmember Soria is of the same opinion as well. So with that, Council, we have a motion, we have a second. It seems to
Council, we need to amend the motion.
Yes, I need to amend the motion. I need to reduce the annual action plan reauthorizing $1.3 million in home program funds to $1.2 million in home program funds, right? Yes, Councilmember Brand, will you second the reduction? Okay, so it's been moved in second. We'll vote electronically, Council. So all those supporting the project vote yes, and everyone else vote no. Yes supports the project, no doesn't. The project passes with Council members Brandau, Quintero, and Olivier voting no. Thank you, Council. We will now take unscheduled communication. I have Barbara Hunt.
That was good democracy. We got something in our side of town. We got the money up here to spend it from our assessor's office and from our redevelopment and from the city of Fresno. We got the money. Let's put some of that money in our district. All these districts here, I spoke on all these things. They got the best districts out here, all over to the mountains, everywhere. And Southwest Fresno is still in the same damn place I've been, and I'm 68 years old, and I was born over there. Born there. It don't make sense. The same people, so we have to have a change. But we don't. I like what Sal said about letting the people rehabilitate their houses. Why going to tear them up and then going to give them somebody else to bring their folks up in here, and we didn't sit around here and wait all these many years for something, and for our kids and grandkids, and they can't have nothing because other people going to come in for their quality of life. What is their quality of life? What about our quality of life? I chop cotton, cut grapes, drove trucks, tractors, forklifts. I work hard. We retired as a sheet metal worker. That's where I can draw my money. You guys got to wake up. Every district around here, I done spoke on them for almost 15 years up here at my 40 City Hall over there. And we've been in the same shape. Same people, same votes, but they're kids. Now you want to come over here and raise the bar, put quality of life? That's why we're going to march. That's why the people in America are saying we're tired of this shit. We ain't going to take it no more. We want to come out, and I'm fixing to walk out the door. Unless you're a security guard, you just don't tell me nothing. I'm a citizen. I pays y'all taxes. I pays y'all money. I pays for the police and the fire department's pensions money off of my taxes. Hunt's Cafe. Barbara Hunt is my name. And I don't care. You guys going to take all of our money, send all our stuff, get all this money in here, give it to the enterprise folks, and you don't want me to talk? That would never happen. I'm going home. Thank you very much. Y'all did justice. We're going to have these buildings over here because Jefferson was supposed to stay there by law, like Southwest Fresno supposed to stay over there by law, and you tore it up. I'm going to bring those papers to you too. And redevelopment, sign with the city council, and y'all know y'all together with redevelopment. And I got the papers. Get that resolution in your office. You're pulling wolves over people's eyes. You ain't pulling them over this old woman's eyes because I got eyes behind my back. Thank you so much. I'm proud of y'all. Have a good, nice day.
Preston Prince, CEO of Fresno Housing Authority. Today was a very difficult day for us as staff. We felt like we did all of the right steps, and yet we know we didn't do enough. So 8 years ago, we changed from kind of a quiet, hidden housing authority to one that takes risks. We try to do what you ask of us. I felt like we fell a little short. We're going to make this development really fantastic, and we really look forward to never letting this happen again, that you hear about developments, that you know what we're doing, that you're proud of the impact we're having. We really are proud of what we're doing, and we're going to continue to work with you. So I just want to say thank you very much.
All right. Seeing no other public comment, we will